This is from the Rolling Stone, and this article goes along with these lawmakers aren't buying Biden's argument for going after TikTok. Get off my screen. The House of Reps overwhelmingly passed a bill on Wednesday that could ban TikTok in the U.S. The vote came with President Joe Biden's support amid a warning from his administration that China had used the popular social media platform to try to influence the 2020 midterm elections and could do again in this year's contests. The bill, which must still pass the Senate, would force TikTok's China-based parent company ByteDance to sell the app within 165 days or face a ban in the U.S. Several Democratic lawmakers, one Biden campaign official, and one intelligence expert told Rolling Stone the election meddling and misinformation arguments presented to justify the legislation were not strong enough. Speaking of election interference, the Chinese are not interfering in our elections, nor are the Russians. The real ones that are interfering in our elections are the Israelis. Why not go after them for election meddling?
They love all the money they get.
Look at how much money IPAC, all these super PACs give to politicians every single election cycle.
Oh, yeah. They don't want to, stop taking the money. They're getting a lot of money.
Speaking with Rolling Stone after voting no on the bill Wednesday, Rep. Sarah Jacobs, a Democrat of California, says the threats that were told about were things that could be done on any platform. It was not about the ownership model of the platform. I think the existing national security threats regarding TikTok will not be solved by and do not warrant this very broad cudgel of a bill. Rep. Maxwell Frost, another Democrat but from Florida, also voted no on the bill. He says that concerns about the app potentially being used to influence elections are not unique to TikTok, explaining, "We saw similar issues with other social media in the last presidential campaign. This is something we need to address for all social media. I think targeting TikTok specifically with this ban is not good policy." Rep. Jim Hines, a Democrat of Connecticut, the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, voted no on the legislation too, based on First Amendment concerns. "I refer to the TikTok China threat as theoretical. Well, it is theatrical," he tells Rolling Stone. Mm-hmm. "I don't want to sound like a China dove here because the Chinese are enormously sophisticated in everything they do, but there's not evidence really that the Chinese have used social media platforms to try to affect presidential elections. Yet we have the pro-Israel lobbies who actually do interfere in our elections. Why is that not being addressed by the American public? Why is the American public not talking about how IPAC is planning to dump $100 million into this election cycle, if not way more?" The lawmakers all express concerns about the privacy of Americans' personal data, but say that it is a much broader problem than the bill would solve. The legislation to potentially ban TikTok, one of the most popular social media platforms in the world, quickly advanced through the House and passed Wednesday by a count of 352 to 65. It now heads to the Senate, where its prospects for passage are less certain. The bill appears to be more controversial with the public than in Congress. Last week, as the legislation was beginning to advance, congressional offices were flooded with calls from angry constituents, young and old, concerns they will lose access to their favorite app. The bill could become a 2024 general election issue. Biden and his campaign have gone all in on the legislation, presumably fucking themselves in the ass. While presumptive nominee Donald Trump similarly pushed for a U.S. takeover of TikTok as president, he has backed away from it now. One potential reason for that money, some observers believe Trump is now courting support from conservative mega donor Jeff Yass, a billionaire investor with a large stake in TikTok's parent company, ByteDance. There may be other political considerations at play. In recent campaign strategy discussions, Trump and some of his advisors have expressed their belief that opposing a TikTok ban would help shave off Biden's support amongst Gen Z and young voters, according to two sources with knowledge on the matter. Meanwhile, some operatives on Team Biden share their belief, albeit as a concern. One Biden campaign official tells Rolling Stone that they personally do not believe that the government has presented compelling intelligence or a sufficient case for a ban. The official says it would be nuts for Biden to willingly give Trump a winning issue, even if a comparatively small one. And for what reason? Possibly bogus Chinese scare tactics, which is all it really is.
Mm-hmm.
A Biden campaign advisor tells Rolling Stone that their youth voter outreach program is not overly reliant on TikTok, except little old Harry Sison and the other little Gen Z for Biden pricks that they have actually paid through Paulette Management. Don't let this fool you. A Biden campaign advisor tells, well, I already read that. Not reading it again. In recent days, Biden officials have been making the case for the TikTok bill in public. Jake Sullivan, that asshole, Biden's national security advisor, framed the pitch in rather Trumpian terms in a press briefing to reporters Tuesday. Do we want TikTok as a platform to be owned by an American company or owned by China? Mm-hmm. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre backed him up, saying, where do we want that ownership? Where do we want the data of Americans, here or in China? The Chinese don't do all that data mining shit that the U.S. government allows the Meta to do. And Karine, I can't stand her lying ass. A spokesperson for the Biden's National Security Council separately told Rolling Stone the TikTok bill is necessary to address the threat posed by certain technology services operating in the U.S. that put at risk Americans' personal information and our broader national security, including the manipulation by foreign powers of Americans' views and beliefs. We already know which foreign power is already manipulating the American public. We know. It's not China. It's not Russia. It's not India. It's not Iran. The administration and proponents in Congress have argued the legislation would not ban TikTok, but rather only force its sale. The bill's opponents reject this strain of thought. It's a conditional ban. If you don't meet this condition, we ban you, says Himes, calling it a lethal threat. The 165-day time frame to sell the company, as mandated under the bill, would very likely result in a ban, Frost and Jacobs both note, adding that TikTok's size poses another problem. Few people or companies have the resources to buy it unless you're Elon Musk. I think if you really look at the 6-month windows for divestiture, it's quite unrealistic given the size of the company, says Jacobs, adding, one of the things I'm concerned about is that another large tech company would most likely be a buyer, and you would see further consolidation of an already consolidated market, which the free markets we already know does not exist.
Mm-hmm.
Along the lines, progressive rep AOC announced Wednesday she was voting against the bill due to potential antitrust questions, adding any national security concerns should be laid out to the public prior to the vote, which they failed to even do so. They did not even put any national security things even on the platform at all.
No.
This is nothing more than classic Red Scare tactics.
Right.
All because they fear China for no reason, when we need to be making allyship with China. Biden officials participated in briefings on Capitol Hill on Tuesday ahead of the vote on the TikTok bill. Avril Haines, Biden Director of National Intelligence, told lawmakers that her agency cannot rule out the possibility that the Chinese Communist Party would use TikTok to influence the 2024 elections.
That is such bullshit.
Yes, it is. We already know who's influencing our elections. Has been since 1948.
Mm-hmm.
Probably before then.
Right. They're trying to get everybody to accept Israel.
Exactly. Who the hell's messaging me? In an unclassified annual threat assessment released Monday, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence warned that the People's Republic of China is expanding its capability to carry out influence operations and could attempt to meddle in the 2024 elections at some level. The section contained and pointed, albeit vague, reference to TikTok. China is demonstrating at a higher degree of sophistication in its influence activity, including experimenting with generative AI. TikTok accounts may run by PRC propaganda arm reportedly targeted candidates from both political parties during the U.S. midterm election cycle of 2022. Oh, Lord. The shit that make you scratch your head and
Oh, it does.
A separate ODNI report late last year offers slightly more specific language on this topic. In December 2022, a U.S. media organization claimed that TikTok accounts ran by a PRC propaganda arm targeted at candidates from both U.S. political parties, garnering tens of millions of views in the U.S., it states. A Forbes report in December 2022 documented how, during the 2022 midterm election cycle, China's state-owned media network, China Central Television, ran videos of TikTok criticizing some U.S. political candidates and complimenting others without clear disclosure that they would be posted by a foreign government. I mean, why should they disclose what goes on in other countries? It's none of our business.
And who's the one that runs around cooing governments around the world?
The U.S. government.
Exactly.
The ODNI report additionally says information from August indicated that China's English language messaging efforts on TikTok had increased focus on the U.S. politicians and U.S. domestic issues such as abortion, mass shootings, and immigration. Gavin Wild, who served as director for Russia on the National Security Council from 2018 and 19 in the wake of the revelations by the intelligence community that found Russia had meddled in the 2016 elections, skeptical of the case made for a TikTok ban, which there was no clear evidence that Russia even interfered in our elections. That was a nothing burger as well.
Exactly. It was announced afterwards that the whole thing was bullshit. And Hillary Clinton wanted to get in office, and they'd do anything they possibly could to get her in office. And they were vicious.
Extremely vicious. Proponents of this legislation have not met the burden of demonstrating that this threat goes beyond the speculative. Wild tells Rolling Stone, if the U.S. government had the goods as they had in the run of up to the Ukraine war in 2022, I'd recommend them bring them. Clearly, the intelligence community is keen to share even exquisite sensitive intelligence when it serves the national interest. The fact that the most we've seen thus far are vague statements of concern and citations of open source reporting itself speaks volumes. He worries that the rush to take drastic action in the fact of theoretical threats could legitimize authoritarian conspiracy narratives about Western social media platforms. Russian hands are used to rolling their eyes at Moscow's claims of U.S. interference based on mere evidence of Western social media platforms paired with public criticisms of Moscow from Washington. It would be unfortunate to adopt a similarly conspiratorial worldview on which assumes so little of the American public, while imparting such wizardry from Beijing, Wild says. During the 2020 midterms, Chinese state operatives did try to intervene more directly to the American electoral politics during a brief campaign across several Western social media platforms, including Facebook, IG, and Twitter, now known as X. Researchers at Meta identified and suspended the activity and later detailed the attempts in a quarterly threat report. The effort was very sporadic and involved only a small number of accounts, targeted both Republican candidates, including Biden and prominent China hawk Marco Rubio, little Marco, with crude memes adorned and plagiarized text. Unfortunately for the trolls, only a few people engaged with, and some of those who did call it out as fake, Meta noted. Jacobs, the California congresswoman, says she believes the PRC and their political influence operations pose real threats, including to U.S. elections. I don't think that this bill actually answers those threats, she says. A lot of what we hear about as threats was around targeted misinformation and misuse of personal data. But American data brokers routinely sell and share this data, and targeted misinformation can be done on any social media platform.
And they give out misinformation all the time from Washington.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're constantly lying to us.
All the time. Himes says he has a very specific sense for the Chinese threat here as a member of intelligence, and worries that the Chinese Communist Party could theoretically tell ByteDance to alter the algorithm so it does X, Y, and Z. However, he adds, don't try to tell me that Elon Musk isn't doing that on a routine basis on Twitter, or that every other social media platform doesn't manipulate its algorithm in service of something, which we know Facebook shadow bans people all the time. So they're guilty of what they're trying to accuse TikTok of doing, which has no algorithm. At the end of the day, says Himes, I just wasn't prepared to bless a very complicated restriction on American freedom of expression. I'm glad to see that there are a few lawmakers and all that.
So who else stands behind this ban? It has major U.S. Jewish group backs bipartisan bill that could see TikTok banned. It's the Jewish Federation of North America. It says it supports the proposed law due to concerns of anti-Semitism proliferating on the platform. And that was from the Times of Israel. So they're saying it's a prominent group in the USA.
Yeah.
And they said that they've been fast tracking the bill that could lead to a ban on TikTok. So it's here we go. The Jewish Federation of North America has been fast tracking it, showing its support. And I'm sure that the reason why these Congress people are pushing it through, is because of campaign cash. We know what it's all about. And that's not influencing an election by giving all this money to people to support, Israel. But Israel's not interfering in our election either. But meanwhile, all this money rolls in to all these candidates to support Israel. That whole thing is crazy when you really, get down to it. So,
This, like what Joe Logan here says, it's a bullshit excuse to exclude free speech, and he's very true. This is even Ron Paul came out against this today. Like he was like, you can go over and look at him on the Ron Paul Liberty Report, and he was discussing this at really good and great length today. And he even said it's absurd. Rand Paul plans on voting against it because he feels it's also absurd.
It's trying to indoctrinate Americans. They want Americans to look at Israel a certain way. Israel's committing genocide. And what? People are supposed to be okay with that? No. It doesn't matter who's committing the genocide. People don't stand by genocide. They don't stand by starving a population. They don't stand by mass murder of people. It's so ridiculous.
It's beyond ridiculous. It's insanity.
It is insanity. And they're putting all this campaign cash to all the people in Congress. And then they're claiming somebody else is threatening the election, threatening our elections.